Sometimes when we talk about remote work, we forget. But something very important to always have in mind is like we work from a space, right? We don't work only online. We work from home. We work from an office before. We work from a co-working space. We work from a restaurant, from a cafe. But there is a physical space. And the panel discussion that we're now going to have is the what, why, and how offices. Basically, when we discussed the Employer of the Future event, we were really concerned about, okay, but what about the offices, right? A lot of people think like, am I going to go remote, my remote work policy? What do I do with the space I have? And we've seen, I mean, post-pandemic, all sorts of reactions around what companies are adopting for their space where they work, right? Companies going fully remote, there's no official office, right? We have Slack, that's more or less like the core of an office space. Or other ones saying like, okay, let's do a hybrid. Maybe we sublet half of our office and we actually invite another company or freelancers renting a desk in our current space, and all other sorts of models also from flexible perspective, right? Like giving employees the opportunity to go into a co-working space depending on the city where are they in the world, right? Like imagine like an urban sports club, but for office spaces. We see that a lot. And that also calls from an innovation in technology around real estate, right? Like there's new needs or more new needs. But in this occasion, we really wanted to do it as a discussion. We will have time for the audience as well for Q&A at the end. And let me jump into the introductions formally. We have David here joining us from PwC. He's a partner and real estate expert and also in transformation, right? And Nikolas Samios, who is from PropTech One, venture capitalist and investing in real estate technology and a lot of opportunities. So, and you know Peter, my colleagues, who is also going to be here. Let me start the conversation by asking you guys. I mean, I mentioned all sorts of directions that companies are taking, but as experts, what do you see in the real data that you have gathered? What are the trends in Europe about the transformation of spaces, our offices spaces in general, and where do people work from? So I don't know if Nicolas, you want to start? It will be very interesting, yes.
Sure, okay, I can start. I think, so we'll hear, I think, much more of these statistics, but the one I think that starts the discussion best is if you look at office occupancy rates pre- and post-pandemic, very simplified, the level is now 50%, right? And even in a city like London, for example, where you never really had a full lockdown, right? So we had pretty tough pseudo-lockdown situations in Germany, right? But London was always open. Office occupancy is down. And these numbers are slowly recovering, but they're not going back to 100%. So that's what you already can see kind of in the trends, right? So there something changed. And then if you go kind of dig a little bit deeper and do some interviews with people, etc., pp., you have all the things that we already heard and that you already mentioned, is that, for example, maybe even the conservative managing directors want to have everybody back 5 days a week in the office. So not the mindset hasn't completely changed. I would say this is not true. But the HR people are like, Jesus, that really gets us into problem, right? So a lot of talents don't want to do that anymore. And I think the most drastic example is Silicon Valley, where people moved out of the valley during the lockdowns and are not coming back again, into the valley. So it's even not possible for them to go back 5 days a week to the Apple, Google, whatever campus, by the way, which are the best offices you can think of, right, on planet Earth, right? So there is something, right? So there is kind of a disruption in the old model. And now, if you are a commercial real estate manager, so let's take an example, you're whatever, I don't know, responsible at Siemens for all the real estate facilities around the globe. You're looking at your portfolio of places and you suddenly now see the utilization is down a lot and interest rates are rising, there is recession on the horizon, etc. pp. So what are you going to do, right? You want to save cost, of course. So to maybe get rid of a part of that unused real estate seems logical, right? In parallel, maybe the compliance people are asking, by the way, how can we now make sure that people working from home are insured or not, and so tons of stuff, of course, that pops up. So in a nutshell, I would say as an opening statement, yes, we see that there is fundamental or substantial change in how the office system works. We believe that a lot of players will adopt like a hybrid office model of some kind. It raises a lot of process tools, data, compliance, etc. questions, yeah, that are not really solved right now. So the first startups are developing solutions for that, and we're invested in some of them. So yes, definitely from the point of view of an investor, which I am, very interesting. Yeah, if something changes, what's in such a fundamental market, yeah, we want to be there. We want to invest in kind of the bravest, most interesting new companies, and so there's definitely for founders, good opportunities out there.
David, do you want to add, what do you see in the case of Germany? I mean, I don't know if there's any contrasting, because we all know that the things are changing. Like, there's some people that are like very much questioning what are they going to do with the spaces where they used to work. But if you can add anything about the German trends, that would be very interesting from our audience here on site.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, for the German market, I can say that we have a big transformation going on here as well, but we are progressing slowly. So we have not these bold movements and bold statements like we have in the US, for example. So our US colleagues, for example, they claimed, I think a couple of weeks ago, that all 200,000 employees can work from wherever they want to. They only have to come back to the office for 2 days a month. And otherwise they are completely free where they work from. And so we do not have these statements for PwC in Germany and for the clients I'm advising, but I can see a massive transformation here as well. And so I want just to underline what Nico said. So we have published 2 studies recently, so one in the first Corona year and the second in the second Corona year. And we asked employers and employees what the way of working they expect to be, what they want to have, and so on. And there are a couple of interesting figures in it. And so one figure I want to stress is in the second study, the employees answered that or 80% of the employees answered that they want to work more from home or remote than they do, or they used to before the pandemic and before COVID-19. And the interesting thing is that in the first study, it was only 70%, so it also vast majority. But so the aim and the ask to work more flexible and remote and that you can choose has even increased, yeah, in the second year. And I think, and I find this quite interesting, because there were many voices that say work from home, you don't have the interaction, you cannot build up a company culture and so on, but it's obviously not the case. So of course there are disadvantages when you're always at home and do not meet people, but on average, the people like it more and they want to have it more in the future.
So, Nikolas, you just said 50% occupancy rate in overall, more or less. Do you have any data on PwC, maybe especially in Germany or some of your clients? Are we below or are we above?
Okay, I can also talk about these studies. So in the first study, there were 60% of the employers who said that they want to reduce office space, in average about 20%. So that was the view from the employers. And that changed to the second study, because there were only 30% of the employers who wanted to reduce or who had in mind to reduce office space. So personally, I think it will come close to the bigger figure here. So it will be something around 20 to 50% reduction in office space for the large corporates at least, yeah? Because cost is a driver and cost saving is a driver and will be.
Wow.
It's massive, yeah. And I think, I mean, reflecting on basically the space nature, right? Like we're saying, like companies will reduce office spaces. I don't know if you guys can talk a little bit of like, why is it that important, right? Because where we work really interacts with how we work. right? How do we communicate? How do we experience places like even right here, right? We have a dedicated coffee space, etc. Like offices used to be so important where a lot of the interactions happen, and now we're going into a more virtual or digital tool type of environment. But what are the factors that companies should be looking at when they're considering what to do with the space they work?
Yeah, so I would say the answer is hybrid. So as you were just mentioning, so we can do a lot of things virtually, but then we do have to have a place where we meet. Yeah, so definitely. So there might be companies in the tech sector that work fully remote, yeah, and that works quite well. I just recently met a CEO of a fintech, and he said he has 500 employees all over the world, and they do not have a single office. And the retention rate, because then there's always the argument how you build up a company culture or something like this. How can you attract people that you stay, because then you can work for every company. And, but they have a very high retention rate, so they were only below 5% leaving the company yearly. And so there are other ways than the office to build up company culture, for example, in that regard. And but I think for the normal companies, for large corporates and so on, it will be hybrid. That means you have to give the people the right places they need. So I can talk about ABW, activity-based working concept, that we are slowly rolling out in at PwC later, but so that you have an office where they can meet and greet and interact and collaborate, but also if there's no need to come to the office, then you simply can work from home with the right technical equipment. Yeah.
I think this is exactly the right point. So that there are different, how to say, in German you would say Aggregatzustände. Yeah? So different situations you have during your life cycle where you want to be working alone, concentrated, yeah, staring at a screen. You don't want to interact. Yeah? If somebody comes around, you're out of the tunnel, right? So you need to concentrate. This work can be perfectly also done at home, right? There are other things which are more oriented to, let's say, group work, right? Interacting with people. Can be your colleagues, but it also can be your customers, for example, right? So the office won't lose its importance in that area. It will even increase, right? So the new office will look much more like a location like that, or it will feature a location like that, where you can do presentations, where you can do events, either internal or external, etc. So that is increasing. But sitting at a computer screen, so just think of yourself, right? So maybe you feel even more productive, yeah, if you do that at home. If you have your situation that doesn't distract you all the time, colleagues are not coming by every 5 minutes asking for something, right? So there even, if you look at how companies that have large computer science departments organize their work, they pre-pandemic already had rules like whatever, in the morning hours, don't come by and ask questions, right? No visitors, no stupid questions. We want to focus on work, right? In the afternoon, okay, maybe you can come around, right? So I think it's different phases, different modi of operandi, right? So and combining them in a clever way, I think, makes that perfect office experience.
I just want to add, and that is because it's so important to have a concept, an office concept behind this. Yeah, because it's not. Everything sounds quite logical and easy, but then it's the fact that if you have an office building and people are all coming on the same day and you have no concept, so that means you have probably dedicated offices for a single person, and you do not know where to find your place to work and so on. So that is the case in one of my clients. So he has a large office building, very nice one in the city center, and but there are still dedicated offices, and there are young people just walking around, wandering around, and they do not find a place, although the occupancy is 20% or something like this. Yeah? So you really have to have a concept, what to do in the office, where you find your space and place that you need. So for example, if you can also have focus areas in an office, because probably you cannot work with focus at home because, I don't know, kids are jumping around or something like that. And I'm a father of 4 kids, so I know what I'm talking about. Then you have a focus area, dedicated focus area, or a mixed area, or a collaboration area. But you need this concept, and then you need to have the information: is this room or place available or not? And then it comes pretty much to technology solutions, because you need something, an app or something, so you know who is in the office, which place is free or not, and this is and that makes it quite complex.
Great. I mean, I think talking about the concept, who should design the concept for your company, or which function should be together discussing how to really create a concept? Because I think a lot of the companies now, when I speak for our own company, like we're really trying to understand what our teams want and need, right? But we also, we are a fully distributed team. We try to have, we have a Berlin office, and it's super interesting, like who should be really designing the concept, right? Because we need to consider the teams, the interactions, the functions. What do you think what would be the ideal team to create that concept?
Yeah, that is a super mixed team, a multidisciplinary team, because so we are, and you have already heard this probably, so we're talking about the Holy Trinity, die heilige Dreifaltigkeit. So it means you have to consider the people, you have to consider the places and real estate, and you have to consider the technology solutions. And these are very different skills and qualifications you need for this, and different type of people actually. And so if you have this at the customer, dedicated to how the new office world will look like, and then for example at the consulting part, then it's best. So because you really have to have all these different angles, perspectives, qualifications, skills to make a best fit approach in the end for the client. And that is not so easy, because there you need real estate experts, you need change enthusiasts, you need technology experts. Labor law is something that is often forgotten in the end, when you cannot change a thing because Works Council or other things are hindering that, then it doesn't work. So you have to take a lot of things into account, and then you have to manage these different stakeholders, which is not easy, because they often speak different languages. The HR director is thinking of something different than the IT responsible person, and so on. So if you have all these skills together and you can manage and steer those, then it's pretty likely that you find something good for the company.
Great concept. Great. And talking about technology, right? I think we are just starting to get used to, and I think in Ivo's crash course in the morning, he suggested okay, asynchronous work, record yourself, Slack, but I think that's just the surface. And in terms of all the new technologies and the opportunities, right, all these new patterns on how we work, I don't know if I can ask you both, what are the opportunities here? How can we rethink about how we interact with the spaces we occupy when we work?
I think there are some obvious winners in that game. So for example, we invested in a company called Desana. It's a Scottish startup, but already active pretty worldwide. And they are working for large customers, including Microsoft, VMware, Nike, etc. pp. And what all these customers need to set up is a hybrid work experience. And they're also asking the same questions that you asked, right? And so what Desana is offering to them is a kind of a holistic enterprise class software solution, where the employer decides these people get kind of credits, and they can now use the platform, and on the platform with an app they can say, I want to work at home, I need a co-working space, whatever, around the corner, because I want to work there with 3 colleagues and I don't want to do that at the kitchen table. And then next week I'm 2 days in the headquarter, but I don't have a fixed office place anymore, so I'm also booking that like a co-working space, right? And so they're aggregating, in a way, liquidity. They're aggregating co-working spaces from around the globe. They're helping them to kind of transform existing real estate into something like a co-working place. The employer can still decide if he opens it up beyond his own employees, right? Because there could be security concerns or something, or if it's just for internal. And by the way, they generate tons of data, because you can say if the story is true or not, that I always say, because in the old commercial real estate world, right? So the CRE manager from Microsoft, whatever, how did they control what office occupancy they had? They called one of the large consultants, which is usually JLL, CBRE, etc., and they hire students and they go on site and with a pen and paper concept, They check who's in the office for a day or so. This is the quality of data you have on how your office is used, right? Suddenly now you have real-time data, and for the first time you see what's happening worldwide, right? Which then gives you the opportunity to optimize whatever your target is, yeah? To reduce the cost, or I don't know, to increase satisfaction, stuff like that. So tools like that are under high demand. Designer is growing 20-30% months on months currently, because this is a thing, right? And so very large consultants, for example, are reselling the solution currently. So an obvious winner, I would say.
Yeah, I can only underline this. So first of all, that was a good business model for PwC as well, counting by pen and pencil. Yeah. No, but this definitely will change, of course, and no corporate real estate manager has a clue about numbers. Yeah. So especially when the portfolio is spread worldwide, then they do not have a single idea what the occupancy, what the efficiency of a building is, and so on. So the data is missing in corporate real estate everywhere. So I can definitely say that is true. And but these kind of solutions that Nico just mentioned, and there are some more in the market, of course, they really bring this data, and they can really do offices more or use of offices more efficient. And you will need this. Yeah? As I mentioned before, to really have the right people at the right spaces at the right time, you need some sort of technology that can steer that. And so PwC, for example, we are cooperating with those prop tech companies, because when we do work concepts and office concept, that is part of the implementation in the end. Yeah? So you have this technology, let it be the big one, Microsoft 365, or smaller prop tech solutions in the end, to accompany the whole kind of future work. So this is definitely one part.
So I'm a little bit of a newbie to the prop tech industry, to be honest. I thought you were an investor in real estate. Now you're an investor in startups. And quite frankly, the startup that you just described, or company that you just described, Asana, they're not really in real estate. They're in spaces to some extent. Can you maybe share another investment of your firm? Because I think the audience will be super interested in how it relates to real estate and to spaces.
Sure. So maybe just then to explain what we do. So we take a look at something like 150 startups per month currently from Europe. So the universe for prop tech, construction tech startups is roughly, 5,000 companies currently in Europe and growing. And we try to pick winners that benefit from these changing usage patterns, changing regulation, the green transformation, for example, which, by the way, is another thing, right? If the office is not used, why you need to heat it, for example, right? So you can easily save money, gas, whatever, yeah, CO2 also in parallel. So picking kind of the winning companies there, and then as a traditional early stage venture capitalist, providing these startups with equity, growth capital, so that they can kind of develop the products and start. And the thesis is everything that digitizes or transforms the real estate industry, because the real estate industry is pretty much the largest industry on planet Earth. It's the largest asset class by far. So also if we speak about maybe we don't need 20% less offices. We're talking about trillions, literally. It's huge, right? So therefore, doing something there, a clever startup that optimizes whatever, these real estate spendings for 10% or so, can be really fundamentally interesting, from a commercial point of view. So we're supplying capital to these companies and so on and so forth. To answer your question, other examples include, for example, Thingit. It's a company that develops something like a middleware, so IoT sensors that are more and more deployed in real estate. Yeah, heating, occupancy. You have a kind of flexible parking lot whatsoever need to be controlled somehow, because the people operating that piece of real estate are not IT guys. It's a traditional facility manager. Yeah, that's used to run around with a key ring, right? So you need to have like a no-code interface to these people so that they can interact with a piece of digitally enabled real estate, for example. Other examples are EcoWorks, for example, a Berlin-based company doing net zero serial renovation. What's that? So a lot of the buildings you see are not sufficiently isolated. So they just they need to be upgraded in the energy efficiency part already under the existing regulation. And this is something that's, again, $1 trillion business opportunity, yeah, because we need to speed up in all European countries. So if you develop a process, a technology that allows quicker renovation process, again, obvious winner, saving money, yeah, saving CO2, getting us more independent from Russian gas, and so on and so forth. At the same time, a large business case. Yeah, so these are the companies we're looking for.
And if you want to learn more about PropTechs and other startups in that sector, PwC is cooperating with BuildWorld, BuildWorld with a T. And so we are publishing every year a PropTech map, so-called PropTech map. So we also scan the market and look for cool solutions, nice technology solutions for different sectors like asset management or building smart solutions and investing, marketing, and the whole life cycle of a real estate. And so that is free to look at the webpage. Yeah, I make some advertisement here for that. But so there we have 100, so the best 100, as we think, the best 100 PropTechs in Europe. And then there's also a map called Contact Map for the construction market and a Green Tech Map for PropTechs with a sustainability focus. And there's so much going on and so much cool solutions. I mean, Nico just mentioned 3, but there are many more to look at.
Definitely, and I think, since we're just at the beginning, I have 2 more questions for you. This transformation of hybrid work, etc. One thing that comes to mind, and I don't think all the employees are aware of all the innovation that could be in an office space. When people are called back to the office, it's not always the case that you will go to the same setup you had before. That's one part. But from your perspective, I see a lot in the headlines and the news that, of course, companies try to come up with a policy and call back their employees, but then employees seem to be wanting different things, right? So when considering what would happen to these office spaces, how much of it do you think is now influenced by what the employees are doing, right? Like this great resignation, or I want to be fully remote. Is that something that is concerning, companies that are rethinking of the spaces? At what extent? We also see companies still betting, right, on we want to have a campus, we want to have the best office. So why do we see still so many different voices at this stage, and it's not clearly yet we're all going to go hybrid?
Okay, maybe I start. So because you cannot think of a best practice model. Yeah, so there's no one direction and that works for everybody and every firm. So we really have to look into the company, into the culture of the company, develop together with them how they would like to work and how they would like to look in the future. And that could be very different. Yeah? So there are companies where fully remote works, and there are other companies where it does not work. And so to your question, people, when I'm a real estate guy, and I do projects, I always start with a survey and asking the people. Yeah? And I always recommend this. So sometimes the heads of the different departments, they seem to know exactly what the people want, but it's not the case. So we do start with a survey, and then we want survey all people, all staff. And I think that is very, very important, because there you learn how your company works, what the people want to have, and how the people could work best. And this is, I think, a success factor for that, to really include everybody in their journey. Of course, not everybody can take decisions in the end and say how the office will look like, but to get a feeling what the work type is, what the workforce is about, that is really important.
So, a follow-up question there, David. I happened to work at PwC for a very long time too. Yeah, really. I'm also new to the startup world, really. But what you are consulting especially large companies, right? And I think many people here in the audience and online work probably at smaller companies and are used to maybe faster change. Can you share a little bit of your experience, how you see larger companies going about this topic, involving so many stakeholders, probably going slow at decision making, especially maybe in comparison to smaller companies that you're involved in too?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. They are moving slowly. Why is that? Because they are large companies with a large responsibility, and they have built up a company culture the last, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years, and that is not easy to change so quick. So, and if you're on a journey like this, so new work journey, you really have to include everybody. That means also the C-level, the department heads, and so on. And there are many different views on that still. And so one thing which also came out of the studies was that, as I said in the beginnings, the vast majority want to be more flexible and want to work more remote and so on. But if you look at the ages or the generations, they are still the generation over 60, for example, that responded that they do not want to work from home at all, 40% of them. So 40% of the generation over 60 do not want to work from home, for example. They want to have their offices and their dedicated office and so on. And why am I saying that? Because these people are often the decision drivers. Yeah? So these are the heads and the C-level and so on. So it's really tricky to get this wave of new work and so on into everybody's head and to include everybody in that discussion.
Do you want to hear?
I think I can answer some of the aspects for the smaller companies too, because we are invested in 15 startups, grown-ups right now, and I'm personally on the board of, let's say, 5 or 6 of them. So of course, these companies evolve hopefully from whatever, 2 founders and then the first employee up to 50, 100, 200 people over some years. So of course, all these questions come there again and again and again, right? And I think we had part of the discussion already pre-COVID. So there were already startups that said we want to go full remote. And then we have like once a quarter or something an all-hands meeting somewhere. And the typical joke is that if you can't decide on a German city, you go to Mallorca because everybody can fly there, right? It's not very sustainable, but it's logistic-wise, it makes sense. Nevertheless, so of course these concepts, full remote, already you could see before the pandemic that it's also maybe not 100% in all cases the best concept, yeah, kind of a little bit of social glue missing. So at the end of the day, right? So as you said, it's still early days. Difficult to say what best practice is, but I think you can see there is a tendency towards something, yeah? And pure fully remote, maybe that's not it. It's also kind of a hybrid, a best of both worlds concept. A small company, in any case, of course, they say, let's just try it, right? Let's just do it. The culture is there. It's a more agile system, and it's less compliance-driven, right? If a kind of PwC customer is starting something like that, the first questions will be on kind of from legal departments, and taxation, for example, is a thing, right? If think about that. If like if you're a small startup, even it's also a problem. If 2 of your remote employees are sitting in, I don't know, Poland, for example, and they are working at home. So this technically means that you have Niederlassung in Poland and you need to pay taxes there, right? So there are some things you need to consider, and if you're a large corporation, you can't just wave it away and just do it. Smaller startups will just do it, right? Maybe then if they face a problem, solve it later, right? Which is okay, that's the startup spirit. So therefore, I would say that startups are testing faster, but I think in a summary, yeah, the main trend is the same for large and small, right? Also large companies, they might even be more cost-driven at the end of the day than startups potentially, I don't know. So we will see a more hybrid approach, I think, in most of the companies. Never forget that there are a lot of companies where you technically just can't do remote work, where you still have to do some physical work in a central facility, right? So we're all in the bubble of kind of the knowledge workers, the IT workers, but there is still kind of industrial business going on where you need special facilities, and also you can't do, I don't know, a chemical research and development project at home because you need to have the lab, right? So this is something that will stay there, yeah, forever.
Maybe one thing to add, because you just mentioned other types of workers. So in a current project, we are consulting a big company. They have around 15,000 employees, and but only 20% of them are white-collar workers, yeah, so are office workers. And the majority is blue-collar, so they are working in repair shops or workshops or in the depots, Betriebshöfe, and so on. And we are aiming to do new work for all of them, so for all of these 15,000. And I think this is quite interesting because they have completely different needs and requirements. So they are talking about clean and tidy break rooms, Pausenräume, and so the requirements or the needs of them, they need to be considered in that regard as well. And I think that is very important. Often you have only office workers, and then it's you make nice and fancy office concepts. But if you're in a company like this, you really need to take care of those others as well, and that makes it very exciting, actually. And I'm happy to consult such a project as well.
It's super interesting because I think, as you said, we're in the bubble, especially our audience here, that we can all work from our computers wherever we are, but that's not the reality. And I mean, one of my last question, it's a little bit bold, but I just wanted you to maybe describe, like, what do you think it would look like in 10 years from now? Because we're just scratching the surface, and maybe you can talk a little bit of how would an office of the future would look like with all the technology that Nikolas has mentioned. It's super interesting. I don't think our audience is aware of how many new technology developments there are. Plus, also, how would this change a little bit the landscape of cities, right? I mean, it's something very interesting because we will still need spaces to work. That's not going to change, but maybe how they are considered or developed will change a lot. So it's just a more creative question. How do you envision this to be later on? I think one of the biggest learnings is that it always depends, right? It depends on the specific case and the industry, the type of company, how many employees you have, etc. But in general, we can think that, I mean, office spaces were very much like cellular spaces, right? Like, if I'm using the term correctly, where you have your own dedicated space. Then came the transformation of like open floor, right? And I mean, now we're again on another big change. So how do you think this will evolve in the next 10 years?
Maybe I can start again because I'm not so creative. I gave up my architectural studies long time ago. What I think is that it will definitely not be the same as it was. Yeah, so that's, and it will be much more hybrid, and we will see different concepts in the future. And ABW, so activity-based working, is one concept because one thing is clear. You really have to attract people to come back to the office. I mean, PwC itself struggles a bit. Yeah, so we have very nice offices in the best city locations. You can imagine large ones in Frankfurt, in Hamburg, in Munich, and in Berlin. And occupancy is very low. Yeah, so of course we are saying, okay, we have to come together as a team and so on, and everybody is clear about that. But still, the reality looks different. Yeah, so there are very few people you can find there. So the question is really how to attract these people, and therefore office spaces need to be different. Yeah? And so that will be more like a business club in the future. I like this name. So that you go there, that you can go there with your clients, you meet there, you have team meetings or whatever. So it needs to be somehow different to what we used to be, or used to have and used to see. But there will be still offices. There will be definitely fewer office spaces for a single company. That is because of cost considerations as well. And it will be hybrid. It will be more fancy in the offices to attract people.
I think answering your question with how it changes cities is also very interesting, because most cities have been constructed with a clear kind of zoning plan in mind. Yeah, it's literally also there are still industrial zones like the sleeping zone, the entertainment zone, and sometimes if you look at a city map, you literally can see it still today, right? And so this is the old paradigm, kind of, that people travel between these different situations. Now, I'd say the more modern concept, for example, if you look at what has been happening in Paris over the last couple of years, is to say you have a neighborhood, and in this neighborhood, so they created this term with the 15-minute city, which means that you can walk by foot within 15 minutes, and within that radius, there has to be everything you do in your life, right? going to a dentist, going to school, your work, home situation, etc. pp. So it's kind of a more localized concept, and then you just multiply it in a way, right, in the city. So getting rid of that old zoning concept. Because we don't just have a change in how we perceive or use the office, we also have a change in mobility, right, for example, and a lot of other things. So this is, I think, there will be fundamental change, kind of, right? And so this is not just a thing of changing the office, yeah? It's changing transportation, it's changing how we live technically, right? And how people interact kind of with the city. So 10 years down the road, we will already see lots of these concepts implemented. And never forget, so we're talking about one of the megatrends here, yeah, but the other megatrend is the climate crisis. So that again is amplifying a lot of these things, right? So also that we will see more greener cities, for example, yeah, because the cities need to absorb more water, for example. They need to be cooler in the future. Again, that has an impact also on mobility, of course. So tons of different trends that come together.
So I've got two follow-up questions on this, but maybe for the people at the screen, we do not see the questions yet, so our screen looks a little different here. Maybe we can pull up the Slido on the screen. But two follow-up questions. I happen to also be from the Netherlands, where you're allowed to be very direct, sometimes maybe even rude, so you're going to get a little bit of this now. Sorry, I apologize up front. No, of course not. You said somewhere in the middle, yeah, of course, we need the people back into the office. Do we? Is that the trend, at least at PwC, is the trend at larger corporates, that people still think, yeah, we do want people back into the offices?
Yes, definitely, because this is part of the culture, to have something to show, to have a place that people can meet and collaborate in, and not to an extent that they have to be there all the time, of course, but there will be office needed. Yeah.
You're very polite, of course, in your statements, right? Because also PwC is also kind of mentioned, yeah, as an example. But reality is that a lot of kind of old school managers want to have their people kind of want to supervise them, right? We literally just yesterday had a court case in Germany where it was ruled illegal that an employer said the webcam must be always on in your home office. Right? So that was solved yesterday at a court case. I think it's not the highest court level, so we'll see more court cases in the next couple of years. So reality is there are a lot of old school people that have a kind of an attitude problem with their people around. They think they must supervise them like in one room.
Yeah, that is especially the case in the real estate industry itself, in the construction industry, but I think still that will change. Yeah, so you will not have these leaders in 10, 15 years from now, because people do want something different, yeah, and do want something else. And so I think this will not be the case. It's a leadership thing. Leading from distance is one thing that we also consult or advise to. And so this is going to change, yeah, and I'm always polite with my answers. Yeah.
So thanks for that. So thanks also for the screen, by the way. So second follow-up question. I've been taking notes very carefully, right? So I hear 50% down on occupancy rate. Companies making their offices into shared places, like this venue here. The amplifier could be a shared economy office space. Technology is growing, like metaverse, which will be a new kind of office, and you can save incredible cost. I'm in the bubble, right? The work motion, we're a startup scale-up bubble, and I see massive change ahead. If I then hear the two of you, who are obviously much more experienced in this business of real estate, the vision that you described in 10 years from now, to me, doesn't sound as exciting as I think the change should be. In my view, and I'm very curious to hear from you how you see this, offices are gone. We can solve them in two very good ways. Bring them down 50%, so they're not gone. But let's decrease them to 50% only, and in the process, solve the problem of housing. But maybe that's too easy to say, is it?
Oh, I think there will be some conversion going on from office space to housing, because as you all know, we have a big housing problem, and housing will change as well. Yeah? So Nico just mentioned how this all affects different ways of how we shop, how we live, and so on. So there will be also changes in the apartments, for example. Floor plans will change so that you have a dedicated area to work in or a dedicated room also. But therefore you need space and someone has to pay for all this. Yeah? So there might be a shift from the city center where space is expensive more to the outer areas and things like this, but we don't see it yet. Yeah? So we do not see this huge movements from the city because everybody wants to live in the city. Yeah? So there are still the need or the necessity to meet people and to see people, and maybe the 15 minutes neighborhood is something that will come more and more into realization, but I still believe, like large corporates in Germany, so they even have their location in the name. Yeah? So for example, Boehringer Ingelheim, yeah? It's a large pharma company, and they are located in Ingelheim, and they are proud to have this headquarter there, and they are proud to present this and to bring people there, and so on. So this will not dissolve completely.
Great. I think we have quite a lot of questions. I'm seeing them popping up and popping up. So we'll just open up for the audience Q&A. You all can use Slido. You can also raise your hand here the old-fashioned way for those in person. So the question with more votes, and you guys can see it here as well, is the company with no offices that you mentioned, that FinTech, how did they build a culture and what is it like, right? Because I think you mentioned there needs to be culture in place that allows that to happen. Can you give us a little bit more into that? I think the audience is very curious about how do you actually make it happen when you don't really have an office at all or a space?
So actually I cannot speak about this company in so much depth because he just mentioned it to me and I do not know how he's managing it, but I can speak of my team. Yeah? So because my team is widespread in Germany, so there are a few in Berlin, there are a few in Hamburg and Munich and Frankfurt, and we do not see each other so much in person. Yeah? Even before the pandemic, it was very randomly because we are at the client or we are at home or where else. And how can you build up a company culture or a culture in the team then? That is really a lot of Wertschätzung, so that you really care for your people, that you can also in virtual calls, in one-on-one calls and so on. So that's a lot of communication, a lot of talking, evaluating the people, and then it's making team events. Yeah, so I was just with my team, I was in Bavaria, we were hiking together and things like this, and this really made something. So I put together a beautiful program with coaching and hiking and eating and drinking and everything. And so since then, everybody met in person after a long time, and it was great. Yeah? So I think there are other ways than just spending days in the office to build team spirit and culture.
Definitely, and I think I think the next question is also about how often to meet with teams. Whoever wants to answer this one, but don't you think that people meeting 2 times per year is sufficient for knowledge workers? Therefore, offices are not needed anymore. But I think go ahead, Nikolas.
Yeah, I think the office is not just a place where people work together, right? So if a small kind of agile company, knowledge workers, right? So that's a special part of the industry. So obviously, blue collar workers. If they decide for themselves that fully remote is what they want to do, plus try to solve kind of the deficits of that, fine. But the office also has, for example, a representation function. So if you have a conservative customer that wants to check if he does a large contract with your company, and this is a really relevant contract, maybe they want to see the company, right? So how you organize that in a fully remote situation? Is it really just 5 people zooming in from around the globe? Will this create the relevant feeling of kind of security, for the customer? So for example, in our case, as a venture capitalist, you're used to having a laptop and flying around and looking at startups, so you can do that fully remotely, sure. But we're also raising money from conservative people for our funds. And they definitely want to come to our offices and see that there is a real operation somewhere. Yeah. Also, by the way, we have a small department that is BaFin regulated, right? So we're managing third people money. So we need to have a physical office that also has, let's say, a little bit of kind of security inside, where we kind of operate the fund management activities. So if you are just, I don't know, just a small software as a service startup doing no sales to no conservative people, blah, blah, blah. Yes, maybe you can go fully remote, right? But a lot of other companies will need a physical element, yeah, for one of the given reasons. So therefore, I think the majority of companies will go hybrid to some extent.
It's super interesting because, it just came to mind a story of Work Motion. And as you said, like, what is actually an office is not just a space where you come and work. It has a lot of functions as well, like meeting people, meeting clients, etc. But we had the problem that our official company address was our founder's home because we didn't have an office at the beginning. And what happened one day was that one of our interns show up there, 8:30 a.m., knock on his apartment basically, and he was like, "Is this Work Motion?" And we were like, yeah, who are you? Like, oh, it's my first day as an intern. Because that's our official address, right? So, there's still like there are a lot of reasons why we decided to have an office in Berlin still. But it's super interesting. And maybe just, I think we're a little bit past the time. But we can go with one more question. I think living spaces poses a real problem. There is a shortage of space in the cities, especially in the West. Can you see companies pay for relocation to rural areas? So, I think the city discussion is also super interesting because cities are still here, are still attracting people. What do you think of this question?
We recently issued another study on future of living, and so my assumption was that people are moving outside because there you can find larger apartments or a house or whatever with a place you need for work, for example, to have a workroom or dedicated areas over there, and then you do not have to commute to the office so often anymore. So there were a lot of arguments for moving out the city, but we didn't see that. Yeah, so the urbanization, it's slowing down, but it's still there. Yeah, so people are moving from rural areas, from the country, still into the cities. And so what I think is, in the case of Berlin, for example, that the outer parts like Spandau or Zehlendorf and so on, they will be more attractive probably because there you still only have a 20 or 30-minute drive to the city. But I don't see that there's a big movement going into Brandenburg or something. At least it didn't show the study didn't show that. And so reason for this is that people still want to have this community in the neighborhood. And the other reason is that infrastructure in the rural areas is still not there where it should be. So to do all this, to work from remote and to do all these virtual sessions, you need the right cable, you need the right bandwidth and so on. And this is not provided in all rural areas. So there's a big opportunity for those cities and those villages to provide all this, but it's still not there.
Yeah. Nikolas, do you see anything different on that front? I think
so. Also combining it with the fourth question, what's the situation around Berlin? So Berlin is still kind of, let's say, a new kid on the block in a way, yeah, for technical reasons. So the outer area, the outer rim around Berlin is still pretty unoccupied, kind of. So there is potential. But on the other hand, it's also still possible to move into Berlin and get something. It's getting more difficult. But if you, for example, I'm from Munich, if you compare that to Munich, so Munich already, 20 years ago was completely full. So a lot of industry or a lot of companies opened their businesses in Unterschleißheim, Unterföhring or something, so kind of the smaller areas around the city, right? So yes, this is of course something that will also happen in Berlin, but over the next decades, right? And also, for example, in Munich, you can use the public transport and go from Zugspitze to Erding. Yeah, unfortunately, Berlin, Brandenburg are still kind of not really working together in that domain. So these things will, of course, change over the next decades, and then it's even easier to relocate kind of on the outskirts. So yes, it's happening, but I think you have to look at it like city by city, because the cities have all different kind of heritage, different possibilities, different limitations.
And how developed they can be, right? I think the case of Silicon Valley, I know because I have a lot of friends there that moved to cities like Boise in Idaho, like not even Austin. And what is happening there is a real transformation because a lot of people want to invest there in the infrastructure to keep this type of talent there. But I think the dynamic is beyond just the office space, right? As you said, mobility, type of industries. So we will actually try to answer all the questions that are online, that are unanswered. And I want to thank you both for participating in this panel, and also Peter for accompanying here online. And we'll take a break. It's our lunch break now. Oh no, that's not true. Sorry, I'm not the one with the agenda.
Don't worry. No, so
That's true.
let's first give our panel members a hand. Thank you very much, Nikolas and David. All right.